such a thrill to be screening The Tragedy of Macbeth, European premiere tonight. And I'm really excited. And before I hand over to today's moderator, I want to thank Apple TV+, Matt Dentler, and also the Mayfair for hosting us today. So thank you so much. And please put your hands together and welcome Angie Errigo, who's going to be hosting our press conference.
Producer, screenwriter, director, Joel Coen. Producer Francis McDormand, who also does play Lady Macbeth. Bertie Carvel, who plays Banquo. Alex Hassell, who plays Ross. Corey Hawkins, who plays Macduff. Harry Melling, who plays Malcolm. Kathryn Hunter, who plays the witch and the old man. And certainly not least, cinematographer Bruno Delbonnel. Thank you all so much for joining us, and congratulations on a truly stunning piece of work. Francis and Joel, this is kind of to both of you. It seems this all started with you, Francis, with your history with the play. Now, did you do a Lady Macbeth-like pep talk on Joel to embark on a film, or Joel, did you have a light bulb moment seeing Francis working on the play?
Well, actually, it was a little bit of both. It was seeing Fran do the play on stage, but prior to that, there was, I wouldn't call it a Lady Macbeth moment, but there was a point where Fran asked me if I would direct it. And that's
Well,
what I started
often,
thinking about doing it now.
yeah, for years I would ask you, right? And then there was one point I was working with a theater director whose name will not be mentioned, who I said, I really want Joel to do Macbeth with me on the stage, and he said, maybe you should let him start with something a little simpler. And I think that's why we're here today. You don't hold Joel back. But I played it for the first time at 14. After in English class. Don't snicker, you. Oh. All right, I attempted it. All right, I didn't play it. I attempted it. All right, it's true. But as I'm sure in all your schools, we were given it in 7th grade at 14 to read, right? It's a perfect one to start with. We put on scenes after school, and that was the hook that went in my craw.
Joel, it seems like such a departure for you in many ways, but it boils down to murder and its consequences and crime and its aftermath, so it has some connection with a lot of the work you've done.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's it is interesting how much of the play prefigures 20th century American sort of noir tropes, both in movies and in literature. It's a couple plotting a murder. So yeah, I guess in that respect it wasn't sort of foreign territory, but pretty much in every other respect it was. It is sort of way out of my wheelhouse if you sort of subtract the genre expectations of the piece, but yeah, that's true.
Bruno, let me ask you way down there if you can see me. The film looks incredible. The compositions are so beautifully thought out. Why did you choose to shoot it in black and white, and what were the big challenges with the lighting and that?
I didn't choose it. I want to shoot anamorphic in color, and Joel said, no way. So what's the question? Sorry.
well, what were the big challenges with that particular production design and those huge sound stages? You obviously worked on it a long time with, I'm assuming, storyboards and stuff before you started shooting.
Yeah, we did, but I don't know how to answer this question. Could you? It's just for me? No, I don't know. I mean, it was...
Well, the big challenge in a way...
Yeah, he can answer better than I do.
Say, the big challenge in a way was just the simple, we didn't know what it should look like at first.
Yeah.
You know? So it was really a process of working that out with Bruno over, the two of us, over a very, substantial period of time. It was, I would say, months and months before we even started pre-production. It was sort of me and Bruno in a room, sort of, well, what are we going to do with this? And trying to get it, the two of us trying to get it more and more focused, and also kind of in practical, doable, right?
Buildable.
Yeah,
Literally buildable.
Right.
Because it was images that you both kept collecting, showing to each other that kind of grew and grew and grew into a place, but it wasn't three-dimensional. It was only well, it was certainly three-dimensional inside your heads.
Yeah, but I think there was something that you mentioned at the very beginning, Joel, when we started 3 years ago, more or less. It was about the language, and it was, and I thought color would have been obstructive in some ways.
Yeah.
And there was an idea that the image shouldn't conflict with the language. It was just to say, okay, Shakespeare's first, and even if it's untranslatable in French, but it was really about the language, and so it was all about this. How can we show something where the language is there more than the image in some ways?
Yeah,
so it became very abstract, and the other thing was the theatricality, where we don't want to shoot in Scotland, we don't want to shoot in a castle, in Inverness. It was more about what is a wall, and a wall is just something. That's a wall. It's not stone, it's not nothing, it's just a wall. So, so the audience doesn't connect to any location or idea of something. It was an idea of a castle.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's just two things. One is the playness of it, preserving the play, which means elevating the language to making the language be the sort of primary thing up here, and everything else is below it because it's a play. And then the abstract aspect of a theatrical thing. I think that's exactly right. That's kind of, we had to find that over a period of time before we kind of realized that's what we were doing, but I think that's completely right.
Thank you.
But I think, if I may, yes. I remember when we discussed the Bell Tower, where, I don't know if you're familiar with this, so I don't know how to describe this scene, but...
No, you've all seen it, haven't you?
Yes.
Oh, thank God. That's why they're here.
No, maybe they're thinking we're talking about Dune or something. But Joel said, it was interesting, he said, I don't mind the graphic, let's go silhouette and everything, but there is this moment which is very important when I need to see Denzel or Francis McDormand. I need to see them because the language is more important than the image. So it was this kind of balance every time where we say, okay, we can try this, but there is a moment where that's the acting and the language is more important than anything else.
Thank you. Bertie, I was surprised that you only had 30-odd days, 35, 36 days to actually shoot. I wondered if you could tell us what kind of rehearsal period you had. I'm assuming it was a little more full-on than for a lot of films.
Yeah. Do I need to talk into this? Can you all hear me? Right. Yeah, 35 days maybe, but spread over like forever because the film was shut down by COVID in, I think, 2 weeks before the end of the shoot. Frustratingly, probably for everybody involved who maybe went away thinking, I don't know if we're going to get to finish this. But you're right that we had, I feel like it was 6 weeks, but I think I heard you say it was only 3. In any case, that's a king's luxury in this world, to be able to actually rehearse at all, actually. And certainly, you know, Joel and Frances brought us together as a company, and in a way that is much more of the theatre than, certainly in my experience, is the case in film and television. So just to be able to kind of share ideas, marinate in the play, start to feel, to have some kind of a process. But I have to say that it was a hybrid process, right? Because I guess, Joel, you know, rehearsing plays is not what you do, so that was a departure for you, and rehearsing film in that way is certainly not something I've done before. So I think we all had to learn from the ground up what that process was going to be, and it makes it quite a unique flavour, but it was a great gift. I want to say about the theatricality, actually, that it's one of my favourite things about the film is that they found a vocabulary that seems to honour both the cinematic and the theatrical traditions of the play. But hearing you say that, Bruno, about honouring the language, I think that's absolutely right. That's what it achieves. I think of that motif at the start of Henry V, the Laurence Olivier Henry V, where he starts it in the Globe Theatre, now entertain conjecture over time. It's all about conjecture, conjure up this image, and then they go into the fields of Crécy or wherever they are. But I think this is even more subtle because it's taking things away and allowing the play to speak, supported by an incredible production design, beautiful cinematography, and all the toys actually, but always taking away anything that would overcolour, if you pardon the expression, the language. I think that's why it's so resonant for me, and yeah, it's a great thing to be part of.
And did you all feel, I don't want to assume, but I think we've all kind of agreed that we feel like we set the tone and the style by being in that room together. There was like things that we had to answer because we were doing the verse and we were doing it on film rather than on stage. But that 3 weeks, unpaid by the way, that we all volunteered for, was really important, because then we all, it wasn't like we showed up and we didn't know what each other was going to do. We were really a part of a company.
And we knew exactly what we were in, which I think was so important. We knew the rules of engagement from an acting perspective. The language, I think, was very much born from those 3 weeks in that room together.
Corey, I wanted to ask you, a lot of people are more familiar with you for roles like Stokely Carmichael and Dr. Dre, but I note that your Broadway debut was in Shakespeare. You played Tybalt in Romeo and Juliet, which I saw, and yeah, and I wondered, and here you are back in the Bard's saddle. Yes. What to you was the essential difference between doing Shakespeare on stage and doing a cinematic Shakespeare?
First of all, I just counted myself really lucky to be able to come back to the Bard's language, and but at the end of the day, I think it just goes back to what Evan was saying. I mean, this, you know, a lot of times it's, you know, people say, you know, you have to work the text, you know, but a lot of this process was just allowing the text to work and getting out of the way of it. And again, that was provided by, it's always about, again, knowing the rules of engagement, knowing the world that you're stepping into, and allowing that space. And this film, I mean, this play is all about those contrasts. And there is the contrast of black and white. There's the contrast of good and evil. There's the contrast of fate and choice. But the black and white of it all allows us to kind of step in there in the middle somewhere and feel that with all of these unique characters and choices. And I think those are the same. I mean, it's the same language whether you're on stage or on film. Of course, it's technical difficulties and all of that, and that was the fun of being in that room for 3 weeks. It did feel like a little bit more than 3 weeks, because and that was the fun of it. Like, I just remember getting in that room. So that process was theater. I felt like a company. We were in the room, literally reading each other's lines. It wasn't blah 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 blah, 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 you know. It was just really understanding the text from this perspective, from that perspective, reading this and just attacking it in all different ways and throwing it out and then bringing it back and just playing. And that allows the audience to then come to this film and relate in a way that sometimes I don't normally relate to Shakespeare on film. And so that was a joy. Yeah, I guess those were the like, similarities. I think it's all sort of in the same world, and just really lucky.
Thank you.
Lucky to be playing with these guys.
Alex, one of the things that I thought was so inventive was the way Joel and you added a layer of intrigue by making Ross more prominent as this man in the shadows who's overhearing everything and seeing everything. And I really found him, and he's so enigmatic, I kept thinking, now is he playing both sides? What's going on here? That must have been fairly exciting. I wondered what kind of conversations you and Joel and Fran had about that.
Yeah, it was incredibly exciting. I knew the play quite well, and when I found out I was auditioning for and then getting the part of Ross, I was like, that's cool, I'm really excited about that. And then read the script, and I was like, this is much more than, than I had expected.
And after 400 years, you've solved the mystery of the third assassin.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, and then of course we get a sequel, me and the play on.
Yes,
The thing I'm looking forward to. It was a real gift, and I think in terms of for an audience coming to the film, obviously there's a great familiarity with the play and the story of the play and the characters in the play. So I think to have a character that is very unknowable and unknown and a mystery and creates a different layer of tension, which I think is really interesting. For me as an actor, Joel is very collaborative in general, and I would think that everyone would agree that he's very collaborative, but when I turned up in LA to do the part, I had no idea at all how I should play the part. So it's really useful to get to talk with Joel a great deal about, I don't know if you remember, I don't think we talked that much about his agenda. It was more about how he might come across. I tried to think quite dramaturgically about each scene, what is new that the audience might find out in this scene or the next scene or the next scene. How can we sort of throw them off the scent of what they... Every time, the idea was, for me anyway, I hope you agree, Joel, that just as the audience might get to grips with what he was doing or what his agenda was, we would play the next scene in a different way as to throw, you off the scent.
Yeah, I remember we had an initial conversation on the telephone before you came over, and we were trying to sort it out in a really general way.
Yeah.
But I don't think we knew exactly what we wanted to do until you came. But it's, I want to say there is a long tradition in productions of this play of playing Ross in different ways, and that was something that we were alive to and just thought, well, let's go with it. So it's all part of the sort of history of the production of the play at any rate. And you're right. We talked about keeping it ambiguous, and there was something by doing that for me I felt, and if you talk about it dramaturgically, it gives the story. It's a kind of story juice. You know what I mean? As you're going through as you're following the story of the play, it's just one more element that's giving you, that's not about language, it's not about any of the rest of it, it's just a little bit more about intrigue and story. And that was part of the attraction of taking that character and making him prominent in the play, but keeping him ambiguous.
It's like the line it's Donalbain, isn't it, Harry, that says there's daggers in men's smiles. That always seemed to be a good headline for Ross for me. But also what Duncan says about there's no
art to find the mind's construction in the face.
He was a man on whom I had an absolute trust. And so I feel like that's something about that's a real thrumming heartbeat of the Ross character to the story.
Yeah, that's true.
An audience point of view too, I don't know if you thought about this, Joel, but these plays tend to sometimes peter out a bit at the end because you've got all these disparate scenes in, the different armies in different places, they're short scenes. How do you sort of sew them together? And once Macbeth is, spoiler alert, dead, it is called the tragedy of Macbeth. It is called the tragedy of Macbeth. Once that happens, it can be difficult sometimes with the structures of these plays to sort of keep them moving right to the end. And I think having this mystery continue right into the last sort of shot, last moment, this mystery that Joel has sort of weaved through the play helps, I think, really keep it moving to a climax.
Well, you kind of start the play and end the play. I mean, in this, that's.
It's a privilege.
But it's, it was a lot of fun. And then there was, I have to say, it was also a lot of fun working with Mary Zofries on terms of what this character would wear.
Isn't it a great outfit? I feel like it's something, that will be on the runway.
They'll all be wearing it.
In September.
Harry, you've worked with Joel before, but I'm sure, and the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, I'm expecting the tone on this was a bit different. And I really got to ask, I gather that Francis and Denzel Washington worked a long time together before you all came together for rehearsals. On their dynamic, their relationship. Well, when they arrived, were they like Mama and Papa to the company, or were they like big, scary acting beasts?
They were terrifying. No, it was. In fact, it was lovely to go join the company and just to feel that this is very much a moving train, and you've got to get on, and here we go. It was a kind of wonderful feeling. Kind of felt very energized, very very special. So yeah, and working again with Joel was just a dream. I mean, truly, just the biggest dream to have another outing. This time with arms and legs. So. What next?
I did, when we were making Buster, I did say to Harry, when he was doing the Shakespeare, that you're not going to be able to saw the air with your arms. He somehow resisted the impulse on this movie too.
No, but it was wonderful, and everyone's talking about this rehearsal period, but that was such a unique time for me, and working out how it was going to work, and it was just such a luxury, and it made, as Corey said, the whole experience felt very much a hybrid between the theatrical experience and a cinematic experience. And I think from my watching of the film, that was what I so loved about it, how it stranded both of those worlds so uniquely.
And your question to Harry about the mother and the father, the thing, Denzel and I are the last people they want as their parents. I just want to put that out there. But I also think that part of what the rehearsal room was for us was really being able to say to all of you, and you say back to us, we're risking something.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right? And we did. We risked really falling on our face in front of them so that we could get a little bit closer to what we wanted to do on film with our characters, right? And I think we actually had this Denzel instituted this kind of sometimes a more casual way of approaching it, where we would kind of be able to throw off the idea that it was an important play and it was Shakespeare, and then we would just get kind of funky with it, and that was good, right? That made it a little bit.
It's crazy that people don't rehearse, isn't it, really, when you think about it? Because, I mean, as you put it, I think what people who don't work in the theatre or in film, people who don't work with actors think rehearsal is about practice, when actually the process of rehearsal is about discovery. You don't know at the start what you're going to make at the end, and you go through that doorway and you find out by connection with the other artists what you could do that you didn't know, even though people have done lots of clever work and probably designed the thing within an inch of its life and storyboarded it shot for shot, but actually the brave directors, cinematographers, producers throw all that out, just like actors. You do your homework before you turn up in rehearsal, and then you have to be alive to, which is what you're talking about, right? And then you hope that your performance is broader, deeper, and better as a result. And I think there was that genuine invitation, and it's crazy, like any film producers out there, if you can afford it, I guess that's the thing.
Yeah.
Or not afford it.
Or not. Just ask politely. Yeah.
But there is that thing of taking risks. Sorry, but that being able to watch, not make a fool of yourself, but like to be able to take a risk and watch, these actors and this director at that level, and if they're giving themselves permission to do it at this level and fail big, why can't we, you know? And so there was a bit of protection and taking care of us, and also I remember.
Have to quote Moses. We have to quote Moses because, come on, right? She's not here, but she said it was like realizing everybody poops. I don't know if you know that book. It's very good.
Yeah, they took care of us.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Now, Kathryn, I am, as always, in complete awe of your vocal range and your physicality. You're very well known for your shape-shifting. For those of you who don't know, Kathryn was the first British woman to play King Lear. And she's played King Richard, so the lady knows what she's doing. But even so, I was gobsmacked at your extremely physical performance here, and I wondered, I got to ask you, do you work with a movement coordinator or a choreographer or an osteopath? I mean, how did you...
On this journey, on this incredible journey with this extraordinary team, it began with Joel and Francine, which played the three witches. Yes, and then Joel spoke a lot about their crows. There's something between crows and standing stones. Standing stones, there's the sense of something that's been standing for all eternity, and the crows, which of course appear in the play, and the bird imagery throughout the play, which was a hugely important motif for Joel. And then, and yes, they're women, and they're crows, and they're standing stones, and they're prophetic, and it was, as you've all been saying, a process of discovery of how to do that. And it's so, and then there was the all three, so we went on this journey of, right, and so I would be in the kitchen with my husband going, well, I've got this, maybe I'm carrying these dead corpses or something, and their dead bodies, and experimenting, and then with Fran at Warner Brothers, experimenting with, Fran said, well, what if they have different names, all these witches? But, and then in, I shouldn't say this, but little smoking breaks, with Joel going, oh Joel, what if it's just one, and but she's kind of possessed by other people? And then we said, but three is a magic number for witches, so I guess there have to be three. So sometimes it's three, sometimes it's one, and which seemed very wonderful in the sense that Macbeth it is also on an internal journey, and is he seeing three or is he seeing one? And that whole thing of hallucinating. But the joy of very much, I felt we've created the witches together.
We were really connected, yeah, because I think that we Kathryn has played Lady Macbeth, I played the witches. So whether Joel intended for them to be connected or not, Kathryn and I did, and so we made them connected in the storytelling of this adaptation. But I have to remind, just tell them, if you don't mind, the first time the three of, we've known each other for years, but the three of us met here in London in the library of the Covent Garden Hotel to discuss the early stages, way before everybody else was part of the company. And Kathryn got up on the coffee table, we gave her a blanket, she pulled some pantyhose over her head, and we started playing around. And it was, there's not a lot of people that would just come over and pull pantyhose over their head. But Kathryn does.
Joel gave me the lead because this thing of crows, so there's a lot of research about crows, so there was a lot to come in with, that's the wonderful thing, you get given a proposition and then you go away and play with it, and crows and standing stones and crows and standing stones and more crows and more standing stones.
I'd like to not forget the old man.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
somebody said, I met James Thierry anyway, he said, have you ever played a man? And I went, I think I've played mostly men. So when Joe said, would you like to play the old man? I said, yes, please. You know?
I remember walking, we were on the lot, and I remember walking by, and Kathryn, she's smoking a cigarette, and I was like, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. I'm Corey. And she's like, I'm like, oh, it's Kathryn. Like, she was completely in the old man. I was just like, wow. I didn't know. Like, no one, you know, so it was just...
The funniest thing was that it's because I had a beard and everything.
Yeah.
So I called my husband in a break, and he said, on WhatsApp, and he said, Kathryn, you've got the camera pointed somewhere, you know, just get yourself together, get with it, with the technology and everything. I said, it's pointing at me. He said, no, it's some old man. And that's credit to her brain come together.
Yes.
Makeup lady,
Jean Black.
Thank you. Okay, let's open it up now. Let me pick 2 or 3 people and we'll get the microphones coming in. One here, please. One right at the lady at the back. And I can see a hand over, yes, is that you, Eamon? Yes. So, where are the mics? You got it, go ahead. And please introduce yourselves when you stand up.
Samuel Spencer from Newsweek. Congratulations on the film, firstly. It kind of occurred to me that it's a Shakespeare adaptation that's really in conversation with the kind of history of Shakespeare adaptations, you know, Wells, Kurosawa, Olivier. So I wondered, Bruno and Joel, when you were preparing the film, whether you had any particular kind of definitive Shakespeare adaptations in mind for the kind of look and feel of the film.
Well, yeah, that's the case. You can't. There have been so many adaptations and a lot of very good ones. So you're always, and obviously we were aware of them. In a way, you know, the Kurosawa it's probably the greatest adaptation, but of course it's also not exactly the play. It's the story because he's not doing the language, right? Although it's a great movie. All of those, you're right. The Wells was really interesting. I think it was a movie that Orson Welles made under a lot of stress, and so it has there are parts of it that I think work and parts that don't. The Polanski is an interesting one also, that was, we were aware of. But I was also looking at and interested in other performances of it, other productions of it that weren't really movies. The Trevor Nunn production that was done I guess it was in the 70s. You can watch that with, it's basically just a sort of multi-camera thing, but as a sort of, an interesting production. And like all of these things, and like this will be someday, it's an artifact of its time, when it was made and how it was made. But I was interested in those just from the point of view of what are they keeping, what are they cutting, how are they, what are they doing with the text? That was a big thing in all of them, right? An interesting thing in all of them. How much liberty are they taking with it? What are they doing with that? And then stylistically. So yeah, Bruno and I were watching, we were watching that, and in that respect, you kind of assimilate all of that, and then you do your thing.
Hi guys, I'm Max from Flip Your Wig. It's so nice to have you all here, so thank you for sharing this time with us. I'm going to try not to fangirl Francis, so please forgive me if I do a little bit. Firstly, it's so nice to have an international cast that's both British and American, black and white. Sometimes Shakespeare can almost go over people's heads, and I have a really young audience, and I always think it's good for us all to enjoy everything, so I hope having such a diverse cast allows that to happen with the film. My question is to you, Francis. You are somebody that means a lot to us, definitely for me as a young woman in the industry. A lot of times we have to conform, fit in, and get along to be seen or heard. And when you're creative and you're different and you stick out like a sore thumb, it can be really uncomfortable. But then we have someone like you who does your own thing, does it wonderfully, has your privacy, but also rocks out in film and in theatre. I'm wondering, are there any lessons, are there any things that you can give to us? Because sometimes it is bloody tough in this industry. Thank you.
All right, so here you go like this. Hey, go like that. No, with your shirt. Go like that. I like it, but put it back on your shoulder. Let's see what that's like. Nice. Love it. Working it. All right, here. I'm not really happy with this. See that little thing right there? But if I stand differently, look, I have problems with my body. We all do. I don't like everything about myself. I hate my voice. I hear my voice. I worked really hard to get my hair back. Why? Doesn't really make any difference. There's so much about, I don't want to be anybody's role model when it comes to that, because we struggle. You struggle every day, you struggle. You have to look around. It's not any easier for men than it is for women. I watched my son, who's 27, grow up as a man. It's not that easy, right? But that's our job. That's our job, isn't it, Bruno, Kathryn? We're their elders. We're your elders. That's our job. So if we don't look like someone you can count on, right? It's kind of like when you see, it's like if the house is on fire and you need a fire extinguisher, most of us know it's red. It's about this big, and it's usually tucked under the sink somewhere, right? But if you need it to put out the fire, if you need help from an elder, you've got to be able to recognize us. So if we look like you, you're not going to be able to find us. So it's really important that we keep hold of that arc of continuity with human species, right? It's our job. So I'm really, really happy that you feel that way about me. But I also feel like it's our job. It's just our job. And not to think that it's easy, ever, right? But, so here we go. This is part of it. And I think that the story we've told in this production is part of that too. And the fact that we did it together is a part of that story, right? The fact that Denzel and I were part of the story. But I think when I really like to talk about the diversity in terms of we are very, much more diverse than just black and white. We are British speakers, we are Scots, Irish, South African, American, we have other dialects in our, we've got DC, we've got Midwestern America. We've got a lot of different sounds going on that make us a much more complicated and interesting company in so many different ways.
Now, did you get the microphone over there? There you go.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Zach with Business Insider. I'd love to hear from Francis and Joel about sort of like the journey of producing this film, because I guess we all hear a lot about how it's become increasingly difficult to make like challenging cinema. So I wondered what it was like producing this film when you knew it was going to keep the original Shakespearean dialogue and be in black and white.
I'm not sure. Is it harder now to make challenging films or films that are more, off the beaten track? To be honest with you, I'm not sure. One of the things that insulates me from knowing the answer to that is the fact that I've been around for a long time, so it's easier for me than it might be for someone who's younger and hasn't been doing it as long, trying to get those things done. There are a lot of, there's a lot of money in the industry now, and how it gets sort of spread around is really the question. But there are a lot of, they're not all film distribution companies. Most of it is now sort of shifting towards streaming companies, but they're all looking for content, as they call it, and there is, I think, a lot of interesting stuff still being done. We were in a privileged position with this movie, really, for all the reasons I just said. It wasn't hard for us to get the financing for this. On the other hand, we didn't spend a lot of money on it, so it's always, this was a difficult show in the respect that, only really in the respect that it was somewhat stressed in terms of budget, because we didn't have We didn't have a lot of money to do it. We had to shoot it fast. We had to find a way of making this world without spending a huge amount of money. So in one respect, I think you're right. In that respect, I think you're right about it's difficult. In another respect, I think there's a lot of opportunities still out there.
I mean, just so everyone knows, we financed it independently. It is now being distributed by Apple. But I also think a really important point that Joel's bringing up is that he and Ethan have always made films that were fiscally responsible, and they've always been fiscally responsible to the people who've given them the money. And so that is probably the biggest headline for younger filmmakers. They are giving you a lot of money, whether it's $1 million, $5 million, $4 million like we have for Nomadland, to whatever. I'm not going to tell you what we have for this because it's not your business yet. But that it's, you pay it back. You hopefully pay it back.
I mean, one of the hallmarks, I think, of our own history is that we've never, the movies that I made with Ethan and this movie, we never made a movie where we were spending the amount of money that would sort of threaten the bottom line of anybody who's financing it. It wasn't enough to be threatening. And so we've enjoyed an unbelievable amount of independence and control. It happened to, fortuitously sync up with the kinds of movies we wanted to make anyway. So in that respect, we were lucky. It was never an ambition of mine or something that I never had any interest in making a $100 or $200 million movie. It's just not interesting to me. So I'm lucky in the respect that I was able to make those two things coincide.
And we live very nicely, but we keep our overhead low.
Thank you. Okay, let me pick another three so we can get the mics moving. Gentleman in the second row, lady in the first there frantically waving, and a lady towards the back by the pillar there. Thanks, go ahead.
Thank you. James Wilson, Radio Harrow. Mr. Coen, congratulations on the movie. How did you go about creating the atmosphere of medieval Scotland in sound stages in Los Angeles, and to the cast, how did you respond to what Joel and the rest of the production team created?
Well, it's interesting because the one issue I would take with that is, or a way of answering it is, I think early on, we decided that this version of the play really didn't have anything to do with Scotland. It was when Shakespeare wrote the play, it had a lot to do with Scotland. James was king. He was a descendant of Banquo. And for political reasons, he knew James was going to watch the play, and he did. And for political reasons, he was doing a story about Scotland. None of that is known or interesting to most of the people. I mean, it's interesting to scholars of the play, but it's not something you need to know. The play is about so many other things. The play is so huge in terms of what it's about, that it doesn't really need to be about Scotland in particular, and you can still do an adaptation of it. I think that says something about what Shakespeare wrote. So that was the first thing. We weren't really, people call it, they're all Thanes, they're going to places like Fife. But Scotland really wasn't, in the political aspects of that wasn't really what was, I think, what the world we were trying to create. And that liberated us, I think, in other ways in terms of design and everything else about the play. As I said, in terms of how we found that sort of goes back to the first question, which was this kind of discussion that preceded the pre-production of the play between Bruno and I, and that was that part of the discovery.
What was it like riding a horse in a soundstage, Corey?
I remember my first day was on a horse. And I think maybe, again, I'm DC, I'm a city boy, so I have to say, that was one of the most scary, and I remember walking in, and Denzel's just sitting there in the back like this. I'm like, why are you here, D? What's up? But he was there every day. I mean, like, he would just come just because he loved to be in process and just watching, and Fran and everybody's there, and I'm like, oh my God, here goes the chance to fuck it up. And excuse me, sorry. But I remember getting on that horse and coming down. It was the same with us. And I get to the mark, and the horse would rehearse it every time perfectly. But when it was time to shoot, he would just move on over off the and I kept going, I kept asking the wranglers, I'm like, guys, something is wrong here, something is wrong, I'll be quick. Something's wrong here, I think that, the horse is, and I'm like, this is my first thing, and I'm like freaking out in my head, trying to keep it cool. And Joe's like, that's cool, we'll do it again. And I'm like, okay, so we do it again, and the horse just goes on. And I'm like, what is going on? And so finally, the wrangler, and these guys have been doing this for years, the horse wranglers in LA, and he said, Corey, from here up, everything is fine. But if you look down, you're telling the horse to move because you're kicking it like this. Yeah. So my body's like this, and I'm just kicking the horse because I'm so nervous. But no, I mean, that was just incredible. But again, like, it was just, that's the beauty and fun of learning something new and being on a sound stage, creating this scope. But inside, I mean, it's just, again, the theatricality of it was fun. It was a challenge. But that was cool. It was my first day because I got that out of the way.
Yes. I'm afraid I'm being told that our guests are going to have to be whisked away in a moment, so we just have time for one more question. And I know you're
We're not busy.
Gasping. Go ahead. Go ahead, dear.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Anita Nicole, and my question is to Joel. One of my dad's first and favorite films is Blood Simple, and it's one of your directorial debuts. Up until now, recently, the tragedy of Macbeth, what has been your biggest lessons you've learned in your directing career, and has your style changed over time and evolved, do you think?
And what's the last part of it? Has what?
Has your style changed over time, do you think?
Boy, I hope I have learned something, but for the life of me, I don't know what it is. As far as style is concerned, it's such a funny question about style, a vexed question, because you don't really think about style. You just, certainly I'm not saying something doesn't emerge that you can identify as that. But you don't think about it that way when you're making something so much. You just kind of think about what's appropriate to the scene or the piece as a whole, or you're always trying to find that kind of appropriate language is a good way of putting it. Someone said that earlier. And I think that just kind of emerges as a style. It's not a kind of premeditated thing. I think if it is premeditated, it might get a little, I don't know, it might get a little it would be self-conscious, So if there's a style, in looking back, I don't know. It's harder for me to identify consistencies in style in terms of what I've done in the past, from Blood Simple to this. I look more at it, I look at it more in terms of you're on a kind of discovery for the right language for each of the things that you're doing.
But you have worked usually with the actors that have theatrical backgrounds. That's kind of been a consistent thing. And your scripts, your screenplays read like finished products. They're not blueprints. Like often we read screenplays that are like, you have to fill in a lot of blanks, right?
Yeah.
But not with yours.
I mean, and I think what you were saying earlier is part of it, maybe, that it's just that it's things of taste that emerge, And the taste may be personal, and as you're looking for those things, that you keep reflecting your own taste, and that becomes an element of the style, I guess what you would call it. But I think the ambition is to say, I don't have a style. I'm just trying to do what's right for the material, right? I think that's the ambition. That's the way you want to feel about it.
Could I just briefly add, if I may, Joe, on the back of that so that it feels that you're responding to this story, and the whole thing of the idiom of it is responding to the story. So and going back to the Scotland thing, when Joel and Fran, when you showed me some mood boards and everything, I had been working with a director called Peter Brook, who had introduced me to Edward Gordon Craig, who famously and extraordinarily created his screens rather than realism, rather than naturalistic sets, and said about Shakespeare, for years we've been getting in the way and spoiling Shakespeare by doing rooms and castles and everything. He says, if you find an idiom that is close to dream, then you're getting near.
I'm so thankful you brought that up, because that's something that wasn't mentioned, and that really was important when Kathryn gave me that information and that visual stuff about Edward Gordon Craig, who I didn't know, and that was like opening a door into a really, really interesting point of view about how to do Shakespeare. That was huge.
And after all, he says,
in terms of design, yeah.
Out brief candle, life's but a walking shadow, it is a tale. And then, a la Macbeth, told by an idiot, that's from Macbeth's point of view. We can decide whether it's told by an idiot, but it is a tale. And I think what's extraordinary about what you've done is that it goes beyond Scotland and it's a tale told for all time and all place. Yeah.
Amen. Amen, sister.
And indeed, amen. I want to thank you all for coming and for your wonderful engagement, and I want to thank our panel for the time and the wonderful insights. Thank you so much for the work. Thank you.